So there are orange doors popping up all over the world. I see some of you with a point of recognition in your face, many others being like, what in the world are you talking about? Well, let me tell you, this metaphor I'm going to be using is either something that you have been pining and living and waiting for, or this is a great conversation piece for your grandchildren or great-grandchildren that will make you look extra cool, right? So I said there are orange doors and QR codes popping up all over the world. Maybe you've seen them on your phone or in the news over just this past weekend, almost 48 hours. Maybe you've seen them connected to a countdown on a website or doors glowing on social media with a stage exit sign. They have been showing up in London and in Paris and Berlin and Nashville and Santa Monica. What are these doors that are all interconnected, you ask? They're connected to the Taylor Swift album release from this past weekend, right? And some of you are like, oh no, I never listened to that little girl's music, right? Well, there is a sense where she is a global phenomenon. And since it is World Communion Sunday, there is a sense where part of the energy and the life that's happened, at least with certain generational groups, reminds us of that interconnectedness in a really powerful and meaningful way. So these orange doors, they find themselves where you can scan the code and the door opens into an experience, a video that becomes basically a puzzle that becomes a numeric and letter-ridden map. A bigger message for anyone willing to look up or to look around or to look together. And so she's teased her next era and some of the other events that might be connected to some of the work that she's done on these billboards and buildings lit up to match. And yes, it's about some young people kind of clowning around, but it's also about an invitation to notice and to seek. A city becomes a puzzle becomes a map becomes a key, and a key to a door that is a promise that there is a way out. As we lean into this prayer with a new part of it today, we remember that Jesus' words speak to this reality too. That Jesus teaches us to pray, not only in hard times, but in all times, for something better than just directions. He calls us to pray for a trust in a God that is trustworthy, and a God that will help us develop and divine our own inner compass to know and to seek and to find and to notice when the doors are placed in our lives too. And do not bring us to the time of trial, but rescue us from the evil one, the words of Jesus say. They are words that we have spoken from the earliest days of our living, kneeling at our bedsides, with our hands clasped, our heads bowed. And this word, this plea, this request, this hope from us, whether we say it with deep conviction and bated breath or an unthinking kind of air, these requests are not asking for painless life, as sometimes we might interpret them to be, but it's asking instead for a faithful God in a complicated life that we each live in our own way. The posture, in any case, is important to know that the character of God, who God is, God is not a tempter or someone who pulls us into the trials of our lives for God's own entertainment, but instead, God is the rescuer. God is the hand on your elbow, gliding and guiding you slowly in the dark. We might remember that there have been all sorts of different interpretations of this line, particularly. There are ways that the King James and the New International Version and the NRSV and all the different ways that you can read words from the Bible, they say and have a different tone depending on which one you decide to lean into to read as your preference. But this line of "do not let us fall into temptation" is one that, again, reveals God at God's heart. That the Father does not trip his children to find out if they can walk. The Father steadies their steps, and this prayer is a prayer of trust ahead of time in the rescuer. This word trial is one that we often think about in courtrooms, but it really is a trial that in the Greek is interpreted as a temptation or a testing or a proving, or in its most simple sense, a time of pressure. It's the difficult terrain that we inevitably are going to meet in our lives along the way. When Paul addresses the people in his time in Corinth that he was ministering to, he knew a thing about detours. He had one or two of them in his own path as well. And he adds a star to the map that he experienced himself and invited others to not only notice and look for, but to count on. No trial has seized you except what is common to humankind, he says. God is faithful, and with the trial, he will also provide the exit so that you might be able to bear whatever comes. Notice, the exit is not always a trap door. A door that comes right in front of you without your own bidding, and you don't even have time to even choose whether to go into it or not because it is in your path to save you. No, there is a bit more will, human will, that's engaged in this relationship between the rescuer and the exits that are provided along the way. Sometimes it's a door that swings open inside the trial so that we can endure. Sometimes the exit looks like one of our own choosing. It looks like courage, or a difficult phone call, or an apology done with an absolutely broken heart. It's not the magic escape that we might imagine. It is the mercy that we receive. And just like a teacher I heard yesterday, he said that often when we walk into that door, we have to slough off most of the baggage or the assumptions or the fears that we hold, that door only has enough room for ourselves, unvarnished and unburdened, and our own soul that is in deep need of healing. Here, together, on World Communion Sunday, with tables set from Nairobi to old-time Nineveh to Nashville, we gather as people who have known trials and have known what it is to learn to look for doors. Paul goes on later in that same chapter that we didn't quite hear Steve read today, but he goes on to speak of the cup of blessing that we bless, making us one body. And today, this world in which we live stretches a common tablecloth in the midst of all of our trials and troubles over our bruised knees that are tucked up underneath the table, still throbbing in pain, and we call it grace. At that table, we practice a different kind of mapping, a different kind of cartography. We mark where mercy is found, not our mistakes, but first, where mercy can be found so that we can find it again and again. Father Greg Boyle, over these 6 years we've been together, you've probably heard me speak of his name some over time. He is a Jesuit who founded Homeboy Industries over on the West Coast, and he says their work, being his whole team from the top to the very bottom, those who work there daily and others who are volunteers, they hold a common culture together to hold a mirror. Their whole purpose is to hold a mirror to anyone they encounter until people see the truth about themselves, no matter how messy or troublesome it may be. He loves to bless trainees with words to this effect, and I hope you can hear these words not just for them, but perhaps for yourself too. They are these: you are exactly what God had in mind when God made you. You are exactly what God had in mind when God made you. Even knowing all of your mistakes or perhaps your insecurities or your lack, God had in mind exactly you when God made you. And then Father Boyle and all of his friends watch people over time, however small or large an amount of time, come to eventually inhabit that truth, to trust it, to actually believe it. That seeing comes to be a way to break shame's spell and ultimately becomes a way out for them, a stepping into a new reality that is disorienting and reordering and divine in nature. Imagine praying, "Deliver us from the lie about who we are. Deliver us from the lie about who we are." Say it with me. Deliver us about the lie about who we are. That's all the deliverance we need. The lies we've been taught, the lies that we've come to believe, unbidden by others. Deliver us from the lie about who we are. There is a mercy there that can carry us through every phase, every part of our journey, every piece of the map that is written or is charted, however we find ourselves willing to follow. Paul reminds the Corinthians how Israel wandered and was tested and faltered and also learned, and he says that these things occurred as examples. Again, not to shame you or me, but to show you and me that God keeps company with people who take wrong turns all the time and yet still arrive. The miracle is not that any of us never stumble. The miracle is that manna met them exactly when they did. So if you and I want to see our lives clearly, we shouldn't make a list of our failures and count woe is me over all of them. But instead, the call is clear and awfully simple. It's to make a map of our mercies, the ones that have characterized and in fact saved our lives again and over again. And once we see those, perhaps we might have the trust and the hope in our hearts to be able to inhabit our suffering wherever we find ourselves just a little bit more deeply, trusting that our journey with it will help us produce endurance and character and hope, all of those things that we need to receive the strength that we actually pray for, to save us in the time of trial, deliver us from evil, that we, in fact, become the answer to our own prayer because of God's power and grace and mercy at work within us. Because it is World Communion Sunday, I hope that we can name the particular mercy that we experience and know at the table, that we do have a cup of blessing at which we bless, and it is an exit from isolation into belonging, from self-defense into self-giving. And to stretch the Swiftian metaphor just a little, there's a global activation today, not of billboards and doors and codes, but of candles and chalices and bread coming out of the oven that is broken, and we can smell it as we sometimes can smell the mercy of God whenever we've come to the very end of ourselves. Perhaps there's a global activation, too, of heartfelt invitations to experience the life that is really life. The world is dotted with doors, and the message they unlock is not a teaser for a song, but the presence of a Savior. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us. It is not a prayer of the untested. It is the prayer of those who know the way and the way maker. The ones who know this one who is both the door and the one who opens it for us. This one who opens a path in your heart and in my heart when all others seem shut. This God who will not only show you the exit, but God will walk you through. Given enough glow from the exit sign to see the next faithful step, and courage enough to take it. May we believe this for ourselves and for the others we care about most today. Amen.